Hello everybody, this is Group 21. We're doing uranium in society. We're going to be talking about today history of uranium, the Canadian uranium history, environmental, cultural, social, physical impacts, the ethics of uranium, and potential problems. So first off is history and changes. The 92nd element, uranium, is the heaviest naturally occurring element. It was discovered in 1789 by chemist Martin Klaproth. He's the guy at the top left. And it was found in modern-day Czech Republic. It was only initially used for coloring glass and ceramics as a greenish-yellow color. Uranium's radioactive properties weren't discovered until 1896 by French scientist Henri Becquerel. He didn't fully understand his discovery, but one of his students, Marie Curie, did. She's the lady at the top right. Curie used tons of uranium to obtain a small fraction of radium in 1898. After this, radium was believed to be the cure for cancer until the late 1930s. In 1939, the first nuclear fission was performed by Otto Hahn in Germany. A team led by Enrico Fermi built the first nuclear reactor, known as the atomic pile. The pile achieved the first nuclear reaction in 1942 at Chicago University. After that discovery, the US did not want Germany to have atomic bombs before them, so they created the Manhattan Project, which created the first nuclear bomb. This bomb was first tested in New Mexico in July 1945. The bombs were used 1 month later when the US bombed the Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Robert J. Oppenheimer was a big part of that project, and he is depicted on the bottom there. After the war, they tried to discover peaceful ways to use nuclear energy. The first practical use for nuclear power was in 1951, where a nuclear reactor in Idaho lit 4 light bulbs at a research center. In 1954, the first commercial nuclear reactor was created in Obstinsk, Russia. In 1957, the first full-scale U.S. nuclear power plant was created in Pennsylvania, generating 60 megawatts, which is very small by today's standards. After that, much progress was made in nuclear energy, which has been constantly improving ever since. This steady improvement continued until the mid-1970s, where there was a bit of a boom. This later fell off in the 1980s, probably due to the Chernobyl disaster. Canada started independently generating its own nuclear electricity in 1962. Until 1980, most of Canada's uranium was from Uranium City, Saskatchewan. The only other significant producer of uranium during this time was at Elliott Lake in northern Ontario. In modern times, almost all of Canada's uranium is mined in Saskatchewan, at places like Rabbit Lake, Cigar Lake, and McArthur River by companies such as Cameco. Canada is the world's second largest uranium producer with 13%, only behind Kazakhstan. 78% of what Canada produces gets exported to primarily the United States, Japan, and Eastern Europe.
My name is Amin Mapul, and today I'll be talking about the environmental impacts of the uranium industry. Most of the environmental impacts of the uranium industry come from mining the uranium itself. Mining uranium is just like mining any other type of ore body. It comes with a substantial number of laws and regulations that companies must follow. More specifically, companies must follow the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. This act regulates nuclear security, environment, transportation, occupational health and safety, and nuclear energy use. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, or CNSC for short, regulates all mining activity within Canada. With mining, there are 3 stages of mining the uranium. The first is the pre-feasibility stage, where companies determine the geology of the formation and ore deposits. Then they move on to uranium mining, where they start to mine the uranium itself. When mining, the site produces 2 types of environmental waste, tailings and engineered dumps. Tailings are what's left over once the uranium has been removed from the ground rock, whereas the engineered dumps hold both clean and waste rock. Clean waste rock is not harmful to the environment and is placed in surface rock piles for future use, while waste rock contains low concentrations of radionuclides, or heavy metals that could harm the environment. These wastes are controlled by the CNSC to ensure no surrounding community or ecosystem is affected. This This leads into the physical impacts of uranium mining. The highest concern for physical impacts is the exposure to radon. Radon is the decay of uranium when it is mined. It travels through the air and can cause severe lung cancer if there is significant exposure to large amounts. While it does pose high risks, new ventilation and filtration technologies within the industry have reduced that risk. As a result, the risk uranium mine workers are exposed to is the same as the general Canadian public. A study that has been ongoing since 1994 has judged that these mines have no radon impact on surrounding communities and wildlife.
I'm Jerry. I'll be talking about the social and cultural impacts of uranium. So the main use of uranium today is for the production of nuclear energy. A survey conducted by the Visconti Research for the Nuclear Energy Institute asked the American public if they strongly favored, somewhat opposed, or strongly opposed the use of nuclear energy. The results showed that a majority of people were in favor of nuclear energy, with 67% in favor, while 29% opposed. Public opinion can be reflected on the perception people have on the need for nuclear energy. When our current sources of energy are perceived to be abundant, the perceived need for nuclear energy diminishes. Public opinion is also highly changeable and easily influenced, because most people don't feel well informed about the subject. This survey shows a direct correlation between feeling informed about nuclear energy and the positive attitude towards it. Among those who felt well informed, 3 times as many strongly favored nuclear energy as compared to those who strongly opposed. Another survey was conducted where the public was given information on the benefits of nuclear energy and then asked how important nuclear energy should be in the future. It can be seen that given this information, a good percentage of people who initially opposed nuclear energy agreed that it was important for the future. The results of these surveys showed that as public awareness on the benefits of nuclear energy grows, so too does public support.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Scorber, and I'll be talking about the ethics and morality of the uranium industry. In the earlier days of uranium and radiation, there was little to no ethical issue, as there was also little to no info on the particular subjects. No one really knew the risks involved, so from their perspective, it was okay. Which includes uranium's original discovery in 1789 and also the discovery of radiation in 1896. The first real consideration of radiation problems and the ethicality in relation to exposure of workers and miners was in 1915 with the British Roentgen Society proposition of protection of workers, which took newfound information on radiation poisoning and exposure to radioactive elements, including uranium, and proposed standards for a better working environment. Later down the line, you have more darker uses for nuclear power, such as the Manhattan Project. Arguably the greatest ethical dilemma that we've ever seen in history. The scientists on the Manhattan Project understood the risks. There was no ignorance in this case. They knew what they were doing. They created something that could potentially pose a risk to end humanity and the human race on Earth. However, they followed utilitarianism and nationalism. They believed that this was going to maximize the goodness for the future of their country and the world. It was absolutely necessary for them to win World War II. So in other words, they did technically maximize the goodness for our future and our freedom in North America and the world. But nuclear bombs could still pose a threat to us in the future, which begs the question whether or not it was truly ethical or not. It's a bit of a gray area, and there really is no right answer to that. Nowadays, the uranium industry has a more focused use in nuclear power. Nuclear power is a far more viable source of energy in comparison to things like fossil fuels, as it's incredibly clean and has a very high power output, at least now, and it's always improving with research and engineering as we go farther into the future. The waste created by nuclear power is also incredibly dense and can be easily stored. So long as we can minimize leakages and things of those nature, we can minimize the risks to the environment and the people in the environment. Of course, there are other risks involving accidents, such as tragedies like Chernobyl or Fukushima, but these risks are very minimizable if you can follow the proper protocols and precautions involving power generation using nuclear power. So ultimately, at least in terms of act utilitarianism, it presents a far greater benefit and maximizes goodness a lot more in comparison to these risks. Since they're so unlikely, it would almost be unethical to not use nuclear power.
Hi, I'm Sean, and I will be talking about the potential problems of the uranium industry. First of all, to consider are the human health risks. This is the first negative impact, possible negative impact that there is. Now, to talk about this, well, we need to know what a radiation dose is. Earlier, Ahmed talked about what possible radiation sickness can get you, but now I will talk about how you get radiation sickness and what it takes. First to know is the unit that we will measure radiation poisoning in, which is sievert. Sievert is usually measured in millisieverts, and it takes about 1,000 millisieverts for symptoms of radiation sickness to show. The general public is exposed to approximately 0.1 millisievert every year, and the nuclear workers in nuclear power plants and uranium mines usually are around 1 millisievert. Here you can see the many different radiation levels that one experiences, such as flying in a cross-Canada flight is about 0.02 millisieverts. A chest CT scan is about 7 millisieverts, and all the way up in space, astronauts experience about 150 millisieverts. And now keep that number in mind compared to the 1,000 where symptoms start to show. Although symptoms start to show at 1,000, it must be considered that any and all radiation exposure carries some risk. It's always a game of chance, and the CNSC and other regulatory bodies take a cautious approach when setting standards. The second negative impact to talk about is the environmental risks. Uranium in the ground, water, and other areas are always consistently measured, as Ahmed also mentioned. They have been constantly measured since 1994 and continue to be measured till this day. What Ahmed did not mention was the environmental assessments. Now, these are done before any license is issued by the CNSC, and they, again, predict the effects of any proposed projects and determine whether if any environmental harm will happen if, say, a plant was to be built in a certain location. Here you can see the different energy production methods and their greenhouse gas emissions. On the left are such things as hard coal, oil, natural gas, and cogen. On the right, you have nuclear, which, as you can see, is very little greenhouse gas emission compared to the rest. It's almost next to nothing. Other impacts to consider are the impacts to the energy sector and impacts to non-nuclear proliferation. Canada was the first country with significant nuclear capability to reject nuclear weapons. In 1970, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty came into force, and almost every nation around the world, excluding India, Pakistan, South Sudan, and Israel, and North Korea, are all signed. This prevents the use of nuclear weapons in general. In 1984, Canada ended its involvement with nuclear weapons, and in 2000 the CNSC was established to control all the peaceful use of nuclear energy in Canada. By 2050, the world population is expected to meet nearly 10 billion. Now, 2/3 of this world population will be living in urban centers, which means a high demand for electricity. By 2040, the demand for electricity will be increased by 50% as to what is now. Now, as the world seeks to meet these demands and also seeks to meet the demands of all the carbon constraints, nuclear power is one of the most obvious options. nuclear power is safe, has very little side effects, and also is widely available, which is the main selling point. Thank you for listening to our presentation. In case you're curious for more information, here are our references, and we will now start to take questions.